I think the first thing to do is to step down from our throne. We create ourselves, we put ourselves on the throne, and we have to step down from that throne. This is an illusion that we have created ourselves. You have to change something. You have to change something, and that's not easy. You're in a pattern, and it's a negative pattern. You have to change that pattern. I've completely abandoned the formal idea of treatment in that way that, oh, here's your treatment plan, I decide what you have to do. I went from treatment to a process of what I call learning together. Diagnosis is understanding together what is going on, where your experience, if you're my client, is as relevant as my professional knowledge and skills. They come together, and so a diagnosis is like a short story. It's a narrative approach in which a person say, oh yeah, I recognize myself in that, and you use your professional skills to enrich that.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Peer Journal where we talk about lived experience and people who lead with lived experience. And I'm very excited to have René Keet today with me. Hi René, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Neil. Thank you for being here.
How are you today? Let's start there.
I'm good. It's morning. I already had a long day. I always wake up very early. The weather is nice. Spring is coming to even to the Netherlands, so I'm fine.
Oh, very, very good. So let's start. What are you doing at the moment and how lived experience comes into it?
Yeah. So what I'm doing work-wise, I'm a psychiatrist in the northwestern part of the Netherlands. I work in a community mental health team in the area of Den Helder. That is really the far northwest tip of the mainland of the Netherlands. And I have a great team that I work with, a multidisciplinary team. And that's really the work that I love. It's the foundation of what I do is in that team. In addition to that, I'm the advisor on international collaboration for the mental health service where I work, GGZ Noord-Holland Noord, Mental Health Service Noord-Holland Noord. And that's quite unique function, so I'm really happy for that opportunity. So apart from doing the work locally, I also have a focus on international developments in Europe and far beyond. Also global developments. I follow them with great interest, and part of what I really consider a global movement of community mental health. And I'm the chair of a European network of community mental health services called UCAMS. And so we connect mental health services all across Europe, from Norway to Portugal, from Ireland to Ukraine. We connect services based upon 6 principles of community mental health. And one of those 6 principles is lived experience, the importance of lived experience. So it's there in my personal life, in my work as advisor, and in my international work. It's always there because it's, as I often call, it's the third resource, or it's my third resource of my expertise.
Very, very good. So it is not very often we hear medical professionals talk about lived experience. So how did that happen to you? Not happen to you. How when lived experience come into your practice, so to speak?
Well, it's a very good question. And I think, of course, it was always there. Also, for all my colleagues who never mentioned it, it's there. It's always there. It's always part of your identity of who you are. So somehow it will always be present, no matter how you try maybe to suppress it or not suppress it, it's always there. So it has always been there. But like many psychiatrists, it was there for a long time as a hidden thing, a thing that I didn't mention. Because when I became a psychiatrist, and that was relatively late in my life, before that I was a researcher, I did AIDS research, I was an epidemiologist, so relatively late I became a psychiatrist. And then I was told by colleagues who already were in the profession, don't mention your personal issues. Never mention in an application interview. And why did they mention to me? Because it was already there then, because also my in my family, very close by, I've seen the consequence of severe mental illness. So it was always there. In fact, that was one of the reasons why I didn't immediately go for the profession of becoming a psychiatrist. So I learned then in a social learning process that, oh, in this world, you may have the experience, but you don't mention it. So, and that's, I did that for like the first 10 years in my profession. I was completely silent about it. Just some very dear, close by colleagues. They knew about both my family story as well as my own story of having had depressive episodes. But I never mentioned it because I thought it would be considered weak. The change for me was that in the service where I worked and later became a director of community mental health teams, um, we worked with peer experts, experts based upon the lived experience. And then some point after 10 years, there was a moment of, yeah, what you call cognitive dissonance. That on one hand, I was completely hidden about my own story. So I never would mention it or use it in an explicit way. On the other hand, I said, oh, it's great. We have this peer expert, and that's really, it makes our profession and our service richer. And it didn't bother me that those didn't come together, but not in the first years, but after 10 years. And it was a session uh, about about stigma. And then I thought, and I was speaking to all the people, like there was like 250 people there. I was their director. They were all working in the service, in that part of the service. And then I thought, what's my most salient experience of stigma? That's the fact that I have this lived experience, that I say lived experience is important. And for myself, it's an untapped resource. That was the moment I decided, okay, I'm going to be open now.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. And how did it feel when you first said? Because it's. Let me start asking with: is it taught in medical professions that does someone tell you during your training you never mention your own life, or is it more like you just look at each other and you know? How does it work?
It was in the days when I was trained, so I think so obvious that you wouldn't mention it, that it was not even explicitly told. That has really changed, by the way, because now we have books about professional disclosure, how to use your lived experience. But then it was just a completely implicit aspect of your profession. What we were told is that you have to find a balance, the right balance between distance and proximity. You have to find the right balance. But when this balance was discussed at all, you always found you're on the safe side if you're on the distant side. Because as soon as professionals or other residents were more open about their own life and own expressions, it was often mentioned as, oh, you're crossing borders there. So it was more an implicit than an explicit message.
Right. um and what do you think about it now? Obviously you appreciate the importance of lived experience, you bring it into your practice and different aspects of your life. But say one of your children decided to become a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist, and or you are writing up the training from scratch. Do you think there is still a responsibility to hold back your story because it's not lived experience practice? Because obviously we constantly explain as lived experience practitioners that we don't only have lived experience of mental health. We know how to use it, we know where to share, what to share, when not to, we know the aims and values, so there is a total training there. um and so that's obviously different from psychiatry. So how would you teach it? How would you tell to a new person in your ideal world? So I'm not asking adhering the existing rules, I'm more asking what would be ideal balance for you.
Yeah, yeah. In the ideal world, I would teach and instruct it in the following way. I would say, you are becoming a professional to support recovery of other persons, and that's really a very rich profession that you are going to do to support other people, and then people will be very open about their own lives to you. That is fascinating about my job. You know, I hear, I think, many more life stories than most other people do, and that is fascinating and that's interesting. And all life stories are interesting, whether it's a mental disorder, yes or no. And you have three sources, and you need all three sources to support recovery of other persons. One is the scientific resources. So use them, know them, explore them, look for the scientific literature, what's there, and also today with AI that has become much more easier to explore it. The second, as important as the science, is the professional knowledge, the knowledge that you learn in the practice. And of course, that's what I call the social learning. And we all learn, but you don't always learn the right things in the practice. So you only deepen that process of learning if you are in a reflective mode. It's also called the reflective practitioner. So I encourage people to be reflective practitioners, reflect all the time. How do you do it? Not only as an individual process, but make sure that you have groups around you. The people feel free to criticize you, ask for criticism, and do that, for example, in the form of supervision and intervision. So that's the second resource. Keep learning in your practice. And now we have a third resource of knowledge, and that's your lived experience. Learn to use it. Why? Because if you are more open about your own lived experience, it will strengthen the relationship with the clients of whom you are supporting recovery. And the relationship is much more important than anything else. So use the science, use the practice, but also use lived experience to strengthen the relationship. But do it, of course, with the purpose of supporting the recovery of another person. It may help yourself. It has helped me. It has really enriched my personal and my professional life. But of course, I do it with the purpose of supporting recovery of others.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for that. So let's now have a bird view of Netherlands, where lived experience, work, peer support, or in different forms happening in Netherlands. I don't know the exact system enough to compare it to the NHS, but you are more familiar with NHS than I am with the system in your country, so bear that in mind. Um, where is it happening? Who is doing it? And in what forms it's taking place?
Very good. So first of all, it happens indeed in different places. It happens in mental health services, but it also happens in social services. It happens in research, and increasingly you see people with lived experience becoming entrepreneurs, having their own organization, so to say. That's so on all levels, you see that lived experience is more and more recognized. Let's first focus on the mental health service. That's of course the world that I know best, but I know of the others as well. The typical way of dealing, especially with people with what we call severe mental illness in the Netherlands, are integrated mental health services. Integrated means that they have the ambulatory, the community teams, together with the admission with the psychiatric hospitals, with sheltered living, all within one service. So we have an integrated service, for example, where I work for people from 0 to 100+ years old in different regions, and the ambulatory and the community teams work together. Mm, Most, if not all, of these integrated mental health service now employ peer experts in different ways. So it has become a, yeah, sort of the routine that we now have it. So that's very important. That is there. You also see that the development of recovery colleges, and for that, of course, we had inspiration from England and Australia and many other countries where there were recovery colleges. We also now have them too. And there are, in fact, two ways of recovery colleges. In my own service, we organize the recovery college ourselves, but it's open for anyone in our catchment area. So it's not so you don't need to be a client in our service. It's there for everyone. But then you strengthen the collaboration, in fact, with the professionals in that mental health service. There are also recovery colleges that operate completely independently of mental health services, and I think there is place for both approaches. We have good training to become a peer expert or lived experience expert. So there are many universities, especially what we in England. I think in England you call it University of Applied Sciences, so more practice-based universities. Many of them now have trainings to become a peer expert. And I would like to highlight one, that's the University of Applied Sciences, Windesheim, that also now has a master degree. So you have a differentiation. So now in the Netherlands, you can become have a master degree in peer expertise, and so that's, I think, is a very important development. And I was involved when they designed the curriculum. I thought, my God, yeah, I would love to do this study because it's very broad. Yeah.
So that's very interesting because one of the obviously concerns in lived experience community is lived experience being opted in to the system, then starts to certain things that's not working or dividing people coming into lived experience work as well. But also it could be it's inevitable part of integration as well for with broader public. So how does a master's work? Because for me, so the training I have obviously was nowhere near a master's degree. It was more like I hold the knowledge, but what skills do I need to practice that experiential knowledge? So what are you studying in master's degree, and why would someone decide to do that?
Yeah. Well, the importance is that that of course people with lived experience have as much variation as all other persons. So your interest may be more practical or maybe more theoretical. You may like to work in a community mental health team as a peer expert, but you may also be interested to have impact on policy and become a manager or a director. You know, we already have an example of a peer expert in another service who became director in that service. So your interest may be broader. And we saw that especially for the people who already had a more, for example, academic training or academic mindset, so to say, but maybe because of the lived experience have not been able to do everything, that a pure practical training was not interesting enough. So it you can deepen your knowledge and deepen your skills so that using lived experience is not only there to as another professional in the team, but also at a managerial or board level, or as I said, to become an independent entrepreneur, as some have done. So it's important that you have also in all domains of professions, you see this sort of task differentiation and differentiation of skills. It's very good. It's an emancipation or a development, I think, of lived experience that is also happening there.
Um, that's brilliant. So do you in a way, for instance, because you designed the curriculum as well or part of the team who
I
did
didn't
it?
design it. There must be mothers there, but I co-read it and I gave feedback on it. So yeah.
Okay, so but so how does experiential knowledge come into it? Because that's a term I love to use, but I know very little about. It's just so cool. Experiential knowledge. What can you tell us about it? Does it come into the training?
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, the way we look at it in the Netherlands, it was once designed that way by a person with lived experience. Is that in fact becoming a lived experience expert is something that happens, in fact, in three steps. Also, to be honest, I'm not very happy about the English term peer expert because peer is a very general word. You know, when I have a meeting with other psychiatrists, you know, they are my peers. because they're also psychiatrists. Or so I think it's much better to focus on the on lived experience expert. That's how we literally call it in our own language, ervaringsdeskundige. So I like that term better. So how does it come in? Well, in fact, as I say, there are always three levels. The first level is the experience itself of deep suffering because of a mental health issue of loss of social connection or whatever. There are some universal things that are always there. Um, then for many people, it just stays there. Then that's fine, especially if things get better in life, it's there. But experiential knowledge is there. It requires reflection. First of all, it requires, of course, to be open about it. When you're not open, it's very hard to reflect, because reflection on yourself with no input is not a very deep reflection. So it requires openness about that experience, reading about it, talking about it, and getting to a level of then your experience becomes knowledge, experiential knowledge. Speaking for myself, I have developed experiential knowledge. I'm not a peer expert because I didn't do the training, but I integrate it in my working and my personal life. But then, so it requires having made the step already from experience to knowledge, and then a training and practice comes in to make that knowledge into a set of skills that you can support other people in their recovery, and then you become an experiential uh, expert.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And if there's something, and maybe one thing that I'm really quite proud of is that this is also now in the WHO. There was a WHO report on mental health development, and I they asked me to write that part of it, or I gave them feedback on it. So this is then WHO really liked it and also incorporated in to their ideas on lived experience. So this has wide acknowledgement, and I think this is very helpful to look at it that way, how you go from experience to knowledge to being an expert in supporting recovery of others.
Very, very good. Um, how about lived experience research? How is it happening? How people get involved? How does that happen? Where does that happen?
Yeah, in different ways. In the Netherlands, we do have a user research center, and the key person in that center is Beverly Rose. She was also there when we hosted a match on peer leadership in the Netherlands. So Beverly is a very good example of a person with lived experience and an excellent researcher who does research now based upon her lived experience as well as her skills of being a good researcher. So that is one way that it is happening by that center, and our mental health service works closely together with her. For example, we did a research on a project of young people using theater and other art skills, and then she became member of that group together with another researcher to really sort of to make a co-designed research project of it. So that is happening, I think, very, very well. Another thing is that another university of applied sciences, the one in Leiden, now has a professor in her name is Simona Carboniaris. She's also a person with lived experience, and she does excellent research now also on, in fact, people like me, professionals, um, not lived experience professionals, but other professionals like psychiatrists, psychologists, nurses, social workers, who have their own lived experience, are open about it, and how that what the impact is on their work. And that is, I think, very important research being done on to see, yeah, how it works. Because for myself, how was it for me Well, I had great support, but then, of course, also when I decided to be open about my own vulnerability, but also I had then to find a way. Okay, how do I integrate it with my other professional skills? And to be honest, I'm still learning there.
That I think majority of the work I'm still doing intuitively, if I'm being completely honest. But of course, there is positive reinforcement because during sessions I get immediate either appreciation of what I've done in the session, or if it didn't work, it comes very clear immediately. Um, one of the things Here is something I'd like to ask. One of the things I do is obviously reflection is the backbone of lived experience work, as it should be. Uh, but it's not really talked about how we do reflection on our own in our own time. We more talk about in group supervisions or like clinical supervisions. There are certain themes we talk about. What we don't talk about our personal journey into that reflection. So I check in. For instance, I have this habit of when I'm doing something in the session and when it's not clear why I'm asking something to the person in front of me, or it looks like I'm trying to get somewhere, if I sense that, I just explain what I'm doing in that moment. So, because one of the challenge is I am constantly reminding and explaining to clients I work with, this is not therapy. My job is not doing analysis work. My job is being here together with you at this moment, wherever you are. And of course, we're going to reflect on things. And if it's relevant, you might talk about a bit about your past, your hopes for the future. But this is not therapy. But because conversation based relationship only existed as therapy in mental health support until recently, it does need reminding. So I just do it by explaining to people there is no behind the scenes work here. Everything is on the table. If you're not sure about something, ask me. You can ask me questions in the session. So then I can get feedback from people. And sometimes when I share something, this is why I shared that. Did that make sense? Did that work? Or actually, because it's really difficult to know when to share and what to share. How do you do that? How do you deal with that yourself?
Yeah, well, so as I said, I'm still learning in this, but so when I think it's the main questions is, do I have the feeling this is helpful at this moment to share something of my own life? And it's broader than my own mental health suffering. It's more that I'm a person and I use my own experience to strengthen my relationship. So it's also, in fact, in the moment itself, it's intuitive as well. I think, oh, this will work, but you're always checking, does it work? Does it indeed strengthen a relationship, or does it maybe work the other way around? So it's an reflection within the contact that you have, or when you do together, talk together with a colleague, that you can have a sort of also dialogue with your colleague. How about this? For example, I always do, and that's something we developed in our service. When we do an intake, a new meeting with a client, I always do that together with a peer expert. So you bring in the different approaches within that talk. So that's a way that I do it, and I always check. And the thing is, I've completely abandoned the formal idea of treatment in that way that, oh, here's your treatment plan. I decide what you have to do. I went from treatment to a process of what I call learning together. And also that I still embrace the concept of a good diagnosis. But diagnosis is not the same as classification. We drifted completely away from what diagnosis is about. Diagnosis is understanding together what is going on. Where your experience, if you're my client, is as relevant as my professional knowledge and skills. They come together, and so a diagnosis is like a short story. It's a narrative approach in which a person say, "Oh yeah, I recognize myself in that," and you use your professional skills to enrich that. So the concept of classification, be it with DSM or ICD, has completely disrupted in my idea the idea of what diagnosis is about. So I go also from the person from learning together. So when I suggest, because I have my skills and my knowledge at some moments to suggest, well, here maybe a psychotherapy could have a place, or a pharmacotherapy could have a place, or a social intervention, social prescribing, or finding work could have a place, that you always prepare together, that you say, okay, what do you want to reach with it? If this intervention works, what will it bring you? And what do you not want that it will bring you? And always write these things down. I always have a whiteboard, and I use it almost in every talk. So it's also visualized. And then we come to a learning together process. And also when after an episode of weeks or months or years, and I end the relationship with the client, I always say, okay, let's look back. What was helpful? What did you like? What could I have done better? So the concept of learning together has really, yeah, become central in my approach in my professional life.
That's first of all great to listen to and hear, but that also, as a person whose day job is working in the NHS, that gives me the vision of you probably having more time with a patient than the doctors here have. Like, how regular do you see? Can you see people? Is it like, because here you have 10 minutes, an hour, and there's always a rush, there's always a waiting list, there's always a backlog. So it's everybody's, you know, one of the pain points in the NHS is we just don't have enough time and we can't spend quality time with patients or service users depending on your profession. How is that situation in Netherlands?
That's comparable. So I don't have that much more time, I think, than England, and it's more, of course, it's teamwork most of all. So it's an interdisciplinary team that we have, and I rather call it interdisciplinary than multidisciplinary, because it means that we are not the same, but we are of equal value. Be it the psychiatrist, psychologist, the nurse, the social worker, the peer expert. So, but for an intake, a new encounter, I take a lot of time. We take like 45 minutes for that, because it's so important that you make a good start. For later follow-up appointments, it's sometimes very short, but I always, for example, when I write down these things on the board with a client, then often I say it's really strange. I make all these notes, and you just sit here. How will you remember it? And we all have cameras now. Make a picture of it, and then say, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Make a picture of it. So then you have something to build on for the next time. And that way, I also have to use my time in an efficient way. But so it doesn't mean very long. It's much more the culture and the attitude with which you do the talking.
Yeah, yeah. So I will digress for a moment because obviously now new questions are coming to my mind the longer we talk. But this is something I think I will choose one of those questions and then we'll continue with the format. But now I wasn't doing intake assessments. So I work in a multidisciplinary community mental health team in which there are social workers, like you said, nurses, psychiatrists, psychologists, um, obviously peer coaches. And we started doing intake assessments. And obviously, the way we do it is usually very different from the next person because our schools of thoughts is different, where we're coming from is different. But one of the challenges I encounter, so it's great if the person is at a place to value relational approach immediately. That's brilliant. Sometimes what people need is someone to sit down with them and ask them, what do you need? What do you want? What's happening to you? Tell me about it. But half of the time, actually, and I don't think we talk about this enough among us, is there is this person who is suffering, and their approach to mental health is, I want a doctor, a nurse, a clinical psychologist either give me some medication or give me some therapy, talking therapy, and all this goes away. Now, and that is very widespread, and that's where I was when I first started to understand what I was having is a mental health struggle. Sometimes even that takes time. You think something else is happening to you and you don't think about your mental health. So, but now I want to make so many corrections in that moment. Obviously, from my perspective, I call them corrections. It's like it doesn't go away. There is no like short, sharp surgical removal of this pain from your life. It can happen again. What we need to do is reconfiguration of a lot of things. Um, but obviously, I don't do it immediately there. But that's what's going on my mind. How do you approach that? Like sometimes, most what I do is that like that in psychiatry. It's like let's first talk about perceptions and expectations from mental health support. Let's start there.
Yeah,
You know.
this is a key point, Neil. And why do people at all often, I fully recognize this, have this belief that, oh, you come to the mental health team or you come to a psychiatrist and he or she is going to do some magic about you and then things will be better. This is an illusion that we have created ourselves. So sometimes you say, oh, people, I should have too high expectations of us. And I would say, but that's the expectation that we create ourselves. So I think the first thing to do is to step down from our throne. We create ourselves, we put ourselves on the throne, and we have to step down from that throne. So I often hear this, just give me the good medication. And then I often say, well, this, medication is not by itself going to solve it. You have to change something. You have to change something, and that's not easy. You're in a pattern, and it's a negative pattern. You have to change that pattern. And let's see. So you want medication for it. If this medication works, what will it bring you? So that you bring the idea of medication, because medication is never a goal, it's a tool. So if this tool works, what would it bring you? And then again, write down. Then I'll have a partner again, or I'll go on holiday, or I will have more relaxed relationship with my family, whatever. Okay, so that's the goal. Then we can see if this intervention brings you closer to that goal or further away from that goal. If it's closer, then it may be helpful. But also write down what you do not want to happen with that intervention. Because if that happens, then you also have to, it's always a balancing act. So stepping down from the throne that we create ourselves is really the first step, and that's not so easy because it's also so comfortable to be on a throne.
When you say us, do you mean doctors? Do you mean patients? Who is on the throne?
The doctors and the psychologists put themselves on
Okay,
it,
all right, got you, got you.
and yeah,
And finally, on diagnosis, um, so I am seeing a psychiatrist every month. We check in every month, and we talk about stuff, how it's going, and then if there's any side effects to my medication, and thankfully there isn't. What happens in our sessions minimum twice or three times a year? I ask him. We have been having these sessions for 8 years, by the way. Very patient guy. I ask him to give me a different diagnosis. So my diagnosis is generalized anxiety disorder. I was diagnosed here, and he just agreed with the diagnosis. I found him after I got help in the UK. And I ask him, do you think I have ADHD? Can there be something else? Are you sure this is the. And obviously, I'm being that annoying patient, right? It's never enough. I'm after a label rather than the solution. And but now we have a relationship of 8 years, so he even knows it's coming from my facial expressions before I start speaking, right? He's expecting that already. And every time he challenges me, because he doesn't like to diagnose people as a psychiatrist, first of all. So I'm like, in one session, I was like, let's address that. How about that? Um, and he says, why do you need a diagnosis? What do you think you have? So, and I like his approach. And I like that, for instance, the doctors in our team actually have that approach, but they also are aware of the system they work in. So number one, I have a lot of problems. None of them are officially diagnosed. The doctors recognize it and then tell me, well, it's really difficult and takes too long to diagnose them. Why don't you live as if you are diagnosed with them? Right? But that doesn't help with my PIP application, which is a government benefits application. Right? And we need to talk about the relation between the diagnosis. Obviously, this is a UK problem, but I don't know if there is an equivalent in Netherlands. It's like, okay, let's not diagnose me and let me work on my behavior change and, try to find the support. But very practical support and financial part of it, you set up in the system you set up is utterly reliant on diagnosis, not my experience. You want a diagnosis, so what do we do? Does it happen in Netherlands?
Yes, it happens too because our financial system is based on diagnosis, on classifications or even classifications that are not reimbursed. So yes, it happens too in the Netherlands. But the thing is, in what you just expressed is exactly um, yes, exactly referring to what I think went wrong with the concept of diagnosis. Because for me, all these classifications that you mentioned, be it general anxiety disorder or ADHD, they're not diagnoses, they're classifications. A diagnosis will be a short narrative describing you, Nil Sonner, a woman of Turkish background, living, working in the UK, having made this transition. Now you have developed yourself, how you've had issues that maybe hinder your development. A short description that makes understandable why you meet the criteria of a certain classification. But why, when you say, because then if you don't do that, then the classification maybe even become of your identity, which it is not and shouldn't be. So I think exactly there, and also that's a discussion that psychiatrists and psychologists have created. We have created this ourselves to say, oh, this was the diagnosis, DSM, Diagnostic Statistic Manual. Yes, Statistic Manual. It was never meant really as the diagnosis, but just to more to categorize. So I think also in this discussion, for me, it's exactly the point that you are confusing the wonderful concept of diagnosis with the much flatter concept of a classification.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that. So, is there someone, an organization, a person, a project who you would like to celebrate today and you think people should know about, hear about, who is in the realm of lived experience?
Yeah, well, can I mention more than one?
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
sure.
Very welcome.
Yeah, because I'm really happy and proud of my own service, GGZ Noord-Holland, because we have over 40 lived experience, no, how do you call them? Peer experts, lived experience experts in our service, working in recovery colleges, and also said all the intakes we do together with a person with lived experience. So I'm really proud of that development. It has very much become part of our service. I'm very proud of what I already called the University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands, Windesheim, where they have developed this master degree. That's something that I'm really proud of. And then of WHO. WHO has really made a very strong point of the importance of lived experience. And for example, you see that I want to highlight one WHO collaborating center in France, in Lille, northern France, where also they're strongly developing peer experts and training of peer experts. And another, finally, also a team that I want to highlight. I have been a consultant for WHO in Ukraine, and Ukraine is really impressive. In this war, they decided to have a reform away from the asylum, away from the classical institute. And so I was also training community mental health team, and I did that together with a person with lived experience who was a co-trainer in that. So in the middle of an awful war, this beautiful development has happened that the peer expert is a co-trainer.
Very, very good. Thank you for that. Um, Quick note, we will put the links in description. So if you're like me and your immediate thought as a listener or a viewer is, I don't know how to Google that, we know, we're aware. We're gonna put that in description. Don't you worry. Um, how about the future? Where do you think, or what will look the future of lived experience work?
It's a very good question. My crystal ball is not very clear. But to be honest, 10 years ago, I thought lived experience the way it is now with peer experts is a temporary thing. It's necessary to make the transition to the third source or resource, as I call it, becoming a complete natural part of dealing with mental health. So you can only be a good supporter of other people if you incorporate your lived experience in that. So I saw a future in which where we would no longer need the person of peer experts, but have it more integrated way. Um, I'm not so sure of that anymore now. I think for a much longer run, there is a place for peer experts in this development. It's very important that it keeps developing. So I was first radical pro, then I thought I was more radical in we must create a world in which it's no longer needed. These professionals only based upon the lived experience. Now I have I think a more balanced view on which I think for a much longer term there is this there's a great contribution, but then we need much more differentiation, different levels of applying your own lived experience. So I see the future in much more differentiation.
Okay, very good. And where do you find hope and inspiration day to day for yourself?
For myself,
Yes,
uh,
personally.
yes.
Where do you look at for hope and inspiration?
um, my hope and inspiration is from I'm I'm a lucky guy. I do great work, but also I'm really happy that I live very close to the sea and the dunes. So my escape is that, especially on weekend mornings, I go for hour-long walks into the dunes and the sea, and I swim in a dune lake or in the sea. That gives me a lot of inspiration and reflection. By nature, I think I'm a rather introvert person, but in my profession, I'm always talking with other persons, so I need this sort of these moments on my own. Another great source of inspiration is in music. I play guitar and I sing in a choir. So that's music is a very deep supporting source of inspiration. And I find inspiration in my travels. I do a lot of travel now with many times to Eastern European countries, including Ukraine, and the work there and the direct connection with people who really want to change their system in hard times is for me an very strong source of inspiration, and I'm really happy to be part of that.
Thank you. Where is the next destination then?
Next week, Romania. I go to Yash, and then I will present in the psychiatry conference about community mental health, and I will definitely express there the importance of lived experience as an essential resource. And then in April, I will go again to Ukraine.
How about vacation travel? What about holiday travel, Renee?
I do that too. I do that too.
Okay.
Yeah, even
All
last
right.
year, I stepped down as a director in the mental health service network, and then I took 2 month leave, and then I went on with my wife on a bicycle from the Netherlands to Rome. So we crossed the Alps and the Apennines. And then after 10 days of cycling, my wife asked me, "How often do you think of your work?" And I said, to my own surprise, never. So it can be a way.
Well, that seems like your wife has a plan in her mind. Just so you're aware. She's taking you away. This is time for retirement and holidays. Well, that sounds amazing and exhausting at the same time. So I do hope you get your rest. So my for the final bit, have you got any questions for me, Renee?
In fact, I have two questions. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
There was one that I already had prepared that I thought I want to ask you, but another question that came up during this a more personal question, in fact, that came up during this interview. Maybe I'll start with the more personal one, if that's okay with
Okay.
you. And that's of course, yeah. In fact, why are you already for 8 years seeing the same psychiatrist? Where does that still help you?
Um So, two reasons. The most important one is the relationship we built.
Hmm.
Now, there is like a talked relationship and I unspoken relationship. It's like my part of my social and security network.
Hmm.
Um, but also, he has been telling me he's trying to retire for the last 4 years, and I am not supportive at all. So I just fall silent. Um, but part of the reason is I wanted to do therapy in my native language. And before I met him, I was in the darkest place in my life, and the therapy I accessed didn't work for me. For the first time, talking to someone wasn't working for me, and that was scary because I always want to talk. So when I didn't want to talk and then I had some kind of not hallucination but like daydream stuff, so this was unknown territory to me. So I knew I needed to see a psychiatrist, but I also wanted to talk to this person, so I needed someone who also does therapy. And I saw him and I said, look, I know you hear this all the time, and I know you're not gonna like it, but I do need medication. I can't talk anymore. I'm exhausted. And he's like, okay, let's calm down, but I need to see a minimum 2 sessions. And obviously he was in Turkey, so I had limited time. So I was only there for 2 weeks. So he does online session for people like me who doesn't have an alternative, who needs a little bit of containment. So it's most importantly, he saved my life, and I trust him. He's now in my mind part of my social security network, but also practical reasons like he does Skype and he does work online and we speak in Turkish. So there's that side too.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah, my pleasure.
yeah, and the second question is about the developments in NHS regarding peer expertise, because it was my understanding during my last visit to England, there's a deep investment in peer experts in England with I think literally thousands of trained peer experts. Please tell me, yeah, how how is that development going, and yeah, what are the st- the strong points? Maybe the tops and the tips from development in England. So what can we learn from development in England, and what do you see as for yourself as point of improvement in England?
The best thing happened was Mental Health for All project, who provided the funding for this podcast. This podcast could happen because they gave me a chance, and they've done amazing work in lived experience. Um, It started with NIH, our National Institution of Health Research, uh, funding through applied research collaborations in the UK, uh, looking for ways to bring previous service users and lived experience practitioners into research. And there were all sorts of works. So there were workshops we created. There is a people's panel I'm a member of, where researchers come, sometimes consult, sometimes co-design projects. We have had conference together, and we have a very wide network. Um, Unfortunately, the funding ended. So not only Mental Health for All is closing right now, but also Arc North Thames won't exist, but there will be a Pan London equivalent of it, and hopefully they will continue the work. Um, so there are bouts of investments and good work, but sustainability is an issue.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for this.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else you would like to ask, or notes, or send a message before we wrap up?
Well, I think I really enjoyed this talk, and I think it
Likewise.
was quite deepening talk. So, in a way, I think this is maybe much better than a therapy session, to have this deepening exchange of our thoughts. So, yeah. So, thank you for that.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our listeners and viewers. And see you in the next episode. Thank you. Goodbye.